Let's unlock tranquility by taking a new approach to meditation. Now, of course, it would be very prudent of me to make sure that the mic is working. Good. I've had some debacles recently. This morning's lesson is drawn from a good-hearted person's question found on Reddit. They wrote, "Is it good to try and bring yourself into the present moment at all times?" The person goes on to write, "Is this the ultimate goal of meditation? To not just do it during meditation, but to practice it at all times of the day?" I know Eckhart Tolle talks about this. I was just walking alone and realized that the last 10 minutes I was on autopilot. I am constantly trying to bring myself into the present moment. Is this a good thing? So let's get some let's establish a philosophical context. About 100 years before the advent of the Buddha, or at least in a previous century to the advent of the Buddha, Lao Tzu of China either organized or composed the 81 poems of the Tao Te Ching. Read them frequently enough and you'll see patterns. And despite the ramblings of stupid white men, the purpose of the Tao Te Ching and the purpose of Taoism is not to balance yin and yang. It is to always, well, first of all, to recognize yin and yang, but to always choose yin. This is a common denominator in the 81 poems of the Tao Te Ching. Always choose yin. But what has that to do with Buddhism? Well, in early Buddhism, a dichotomy was drawn between the Buddha and his wicked cousin Devadatta. So, conveniently, Devadatta's attributes were yang attributes. Attributes of being rigid, fearful, controlling, elitist, cryptic, competitive, and even cruel. However, Gautama, or the Buddha's attributes, are described as being flexible, loving, laid-back, egalitarian, lucid, cooperative, and kind. So we can be flexible, loving, or laid-back. Or we can be rigid, fearful, and controlling. We cannot be both, for they are mutually exclusive. The first time I remember meditation being brought to my attention was junior high. That is also when self-hypnosis was brought to my attention. So it could be said that that was when I began studying, quote-unquote, the science of mind. I've had many adventures since those halcyon days of the late 70s. I've taken many steps, many false steps, many detours, and many adventures and misadventures and misfortunes. I've explored meditation through the lens of religion, through the lens of sociology, through the lens of psychology, and through the lens of New Age hucksterism and neuroscience. And I must say it was the latter that was the most informative. It could be folly. So, getting back to this, the first three attributes of being rigid, fearful, and controlling. It's been my experience and the experience of others on the path that the indulgence of our controlling tendencies paves not the path of peace. In fact, it is the opposite of peace. Dare I say, the antidote to peace. In the first discourse attributed to the Buddha, whether he or she was real or merely archetypical, from a certain point of view, we are taught the Four Noble Truths, that there are stressors. Ask biologists, they will agree. There are circumstantial stressors, there are physical stressors, there are interpersonal stressors, there are mental stressors. We evolved the capacity to perceive these stressors as a survival mechanism. So we do not perceive these things because we believe in a self. We do not perceive these things because mommy or daddy didn't love us enough. We are wired to perceive these things. Now, in the 70s, a very wise and insightful biologist, and I forget this person's name. I think it's an Eastern European name. They said that biology only makes sense when viewed through the lens of evolution. In the late 90s, a wonderful sci-fi comedy was released, Men in Black. And in Men in Black, there was an android that looked very much like an old white man. But when he was in the morgue, it opened up and found to reveal that it wasn't an old man, it was an android. And even an android, something like an android, but controlled by a teeny tiny little alien. Similarly, it has been said that you and I and all other complex life forms on this planet are controlled by our genes, by our DNA, which are ruthless. Their first priority is not our peace and happiness. Their first priority is that we make love to someone and pass on our genes. And the more people we make love to, the more people we pass on our genes, the more content, the more fulfilled our genes are. Now, that might be great for our genes, but as complex organisms capable of emoting, that does not make us feel peaceful. That does not make us feel fulfilled. Now, we do have a dopamine-oriented reward system that keeps us on the path of spreading our genetic material. It is not wired to reward for peace or fulfillment. It's only wired to reward for pleasure and the approach of pleasure. Fortunately, we have a secondary reward system that is not dopamine-oriented, but oxytocin-oriented. And it rewards for fulfillment. Fulfillment in our relationships, whether those relationships are vocational, recreational, interpersonal, platonic, or romantic. Now, Carl Sagan did a very good job in the latter portion of the novelization of the book Cosmos of saying that although our survival-oriented neurology can be destructive and short-sighted, it serves a purpose, and we seek to remove it at our peril. The Buddha taught that our job is not to forsake our survival wiring, but to liberate ourselves, not from its presence, but merely from its tyranny. A more glib public speaker than myself once said that the purpose of meditation is to become the people that our dogs already think we are. Now, a quick word about Eckhart Tolle. He's a lovely fellow. He's very prolific, but when you read his writing, when you listen to him speak about his enlightenment experience, he describes it as not being the pursuit of a course of action, but something that happened by itself, spontaneously, even accidentally, and that he spent the rest of his life trying to understand it and help others replicate that. That's a very important distinction to make. Since he got where he's at, not because of a specific course of action, but because of happenstance, he is an unreliable narrator. That doesn't make him malicious. That just because of the particulars of his story, it doesn't make him a reliable expert on how to get there from here. Like the old saw about a traveling salesman lost in the countryside who pulls out a map and asks a farmer to help him figure out how to get to New York City from where he's at right now. And the farmer looks at the map and looks at him and says, "Sorry, son, you can't get there from here." Neuroscience says we can. Neuroscience tells us that our central nervous system is really complex, which makes sense through the lens of evolution. Some of the oldest corners of our central nervous system is the autonomic nervous system, not even found in the brain, actually found in the spinal cord. Its two prominent aspects are the sympathetic nervous system and the parasympathetic nervous system. They are affected, we access them in correlation with our breathing. Every time we breathe in, whether we mean to or not, whether we try to or not, we're accessing the sympathetic nervous system ensconced within the thoracic region of our spinal cord. It did not evolve to support either extreme of mind blanking or active concentration. What did the sympathetic nervous system evolve to do? It evolved to perceive, and to perceive vulnerably, passively, viscerally, and randomly. The vulnerable nature of perception, it goes a long way to explaining why the members of this archetype of meditation are depicted as naked. Every time we exhale, whether we know it or not, whether we mean to or not, we access our parasympathetic nervous system. It is ensconced within both the lower lumbar region of that same spinal cord, as well as the tippy top of the cervical region. This parasympathetic nervous system has evolved to support both physical relaxation as well as mental release. Our brain, the 3-pound supercomputer between our ears, is kind of like a very enthusiastic child who honestly means well, but is uncoordinated and lacking in judgment. Once again, no malice, but really, really spazzy. When we rely upon active concentration and active contemplation, our blood collects in our amygdala, which functions as the seat of both aggression and anxiety, found at the bottom of our limbic system. However, when we replace active concentration with passive mindfulness, and when we replace active contemplation with passive meditation, this blood mass shifts to a hunk of meat that is described as the anterior cingulate gyrus, located about 2 or 3 centimeters behind the forehead. This anterior cingulate gyrus functions as the hub of our mirror neurons, the seat of empathy. It should not be surprising, therefore, that the great Dzogchen Lamas of Tibet have always insisted, or the highest ones at least have insisted, that the highest love is spontaneous and uncontrived. That's probably why the members of this meditational archetype are always depicted as beautiful. But there's more. Consider this gal the color of a cumulus cloud. Observe how she appears to be actively sporting in tantric union, treating her partner as is described in tantric literature as her Vajra throne, or as they say in the 70s show, as her tool. This would remind us that contrivance is always trumped by spontaneity. When we consider her partner, who appears to be the color of the infinite azure sky, and appears to be passively enjoying the same tantric union, we learn that there are more than one flavor of spontaneity, and that the scattered spontaneity that we might taste of after we consume our third espresso in 30 minutes is always going to be trumped by the centered spontaneity that is the product of consistent and correct mindfulness and meditation. But there's more. When our choices, utterances, and deeds flow from the effortless effort of love's centered spontaneity, our life could begin to feel as blissful. It's not unlike the bliss that is depicted in tantric art. I should say the blissful circumstances depicted in tantric art. Can you see how this has nothing to do with fighting? How fighting and flowing are different functions. This might give us fighting. This will give us flowing. They are different parts of our brain. Now, I'm not going to lie to you and say the prefrontal cortex is a bad thing. It's a very good thing when used for the reason it evolved. It evolved for calculations. It evolved for reasoning. And these things can be useful when we are not in peril. When we are in peril, we need to rely upon the facets of our autonomic nervous system. A bad martial arts teacher will say, well, you can figure it out in the heat of combat. A seasoned war veteran will say, no, you can't. I'm reminded of a wonderful line in the second to final reel of the first Ghostbusters movie that was released in the early 80s, where Egon says, I'm sorry, Venkman, I am terrified by the point of rational thought. Of course, the irony is that he was able to say that in a very eloquent manner. No matter how scared we are, no matter how angry we are, no matter how tired we are, no matter how much pain we are, we always have our autonomic nervous system. So, and it is already wired for effortless mindfulness. There is a big, fat, ugly lie that the secret to meditation is to concentrate upon your breath. And when you notice your concentration is wavered, to force it back. No, that's not the purpose of meditation, according to Lao Tzu, or according to the Buddha, or according to neuroscience. Remember, our sympathetic nervous system did not evolve to indulge either extreme of mind blanking or active concentration. It evolved to simply notice, and to do so vulnerably, passively, viscerally, and randomly. I am grateful that you and I do not need to force breathing. Breathing is controlled by our medulla oblongata, located in the brainstem. It is an automatic process. So as we tool through life, our brains are going to go all over the place. We are going to notice sights, sounds, sensations, flavors, scents, and the like. We are going to notice emotions, attentions, thoughts, memories, and imaginings. We're going to notice the internal, the external, the physical, the mental, the pleasurable, the painful, the interesting, the boring, the glorious, and the grotesque. Sometimes, if you're a nerd like myself, you may remember the reruns of the Outer Limits black and white series. Sometimes our experience is sharpened to crystal clarity, other times it is softened to a blur. Neither is good nor bad, they simply are. We meditate so that we can break free of the prison cell of our 3-pound supercomputer between our ears and make use of the wonderful equipment located in our spinal cord that has evolved to help us to become the loving people that our dogs already think we are. We meditate at least once every 12 hours or so to get better and better at this. Anything we do can eventually be mastered. As a child, I was befuddled by the task of tying my own shoes. You probably were too. But eventually we got so good at tying our shoes that we could do so spontaneously, habitually, easily, and effectively. Those are the 4 adjectives of mastery. Whether it's the mastery of flossing your teeth, or riding a bicycle, or tying your shoes. In this case, it's the mastery of awareness and release. A life can be squandered living in constant resistance to the present moment. In the present moment, we can emote, intend, reason, recall, and imagine. Far better it is, far more elegant it is to make peace with our memories, be they glorious or be they grotesque. In the present moment, we can spontaneously and effortlessly experience a recollection. In the present moment, we can spontaneously and effortlessly notice our energy level. Energy is the 3rd enlightenment factor. Mindfulness is the 1st enlightenment factor. As we are mindful of our energy, sometimes we will notice it is high, sometimes it is low, sometimes it is sharp, sometimes it is dull. It is not the state of the energy that is the question. It is whether we are aware of it and are making peace with it. Any poophead can be peaceful when life is going their way. The mark of spiritual mastery is to make peace with circumstances and individuals who are not going our way, who are not acting in our best interest. Can we make peace with misfortune? Can we make peace with the villains in our life? And there are villains. One need only look at Palestine or Syria or the Congo or Jordan. One need only look at genocide and man's inhumanity to man to know there is villainy. And if it breaks your heart, good. That means you're empathetic. No, Virginia, the purpose of meditation is not to control your experience and to be at war with the soft tissues of your brain. The purpose of meditation is like a musician's rehearsal. Just because a musician has learned how to work their instrument and understands music theory and might even have memorized a tune doesn't mean they can perform it beautifully, skillfully, and then perform jazz variations thereof. Those things are the product of mastery. And repetition is the mother of that mastery. The time we set aside for formal meditation, whether it is for 5 minutes or 60 minutes every 12 hours or so, or more, it's the time when we become more and more and more acquainted with the latent mechanisms of our sympathetic and parasympathetic nervous system. So that as we go throughout our life, when we aren't sitting on a meditation cushion, we're able to react from love's centered spontaneity that is the byproduct of our training in mindfulness and meditation. Sometimes you will notice that you are just sharp as a tack. Sometimes you will notice you are dull. Notice and relax in harmony with the phases of breathing. Do that, and you are traversing the path. This is why we meditate like a Jedi. Good morning, James. To you I send a Yoda high five. I do look forward to chanting and meditating with you after approximately 30 seconds of housekeeping. This is Lama Jigme Gyatso of the Buddha Joy Meditation School. For more than 30 years, I spent about 8 hours a day, almost every day, studying, practicing, mastering, and reverse engineering the teachings and techniques of each sect of Buddhism so that you would not have to. Welcome, my friends, to Meditate Like a Jedi, which is made possible due to the generosity of viewers just like you. This morning we're going to play with a practice text titled Buddha's Easy Meditation. Those who have had the misfortune to be indoctrinated into being rigid and fearful and controlling often take a superstitious approach to the Buddha, seeking to worship and supplicate him as if he was a god or a goddess. The wise simply treat the Buddha as an archetype whose iconography reminds us that we are already wired. To practice, no less, master awareness and letting go, love and letting go, as well as bliss and letting go. This morning's practice is a lot like making pancakes. We're going to flip and flop between mantra meditation and silent meditation. So let's begin by chanting an explanation of the mantra's meaning together. With whom we invoke the Muni wise one, Maha greatly wise one, Muni of the Shakya Soha enlightenment for all. Our first exercise fits under the category of bliss and letting go, which is known in Tibet as bliss and letting go. This particular exercise is known in Tibet as Lama, which can be explained in English as calling the teacher as from afar. In this piece of artwork, this fellow down here represents our enlightened potential, neurologically speaking. This copulating couple overhead literally remind us of pleasurable sensations we might experience upon the crown of our head, and figuratively remind us of the actual teacher and teachings. What is the philosopher's stone that transforms mindless and superstitious mantra meditation into the gold of spiritually productive mantra meditation? The answer is twofold. During our inhalation, we silently, mentally, and passively recite this italicized bit. During the exhalation, we physically relax as best we can, while striving to chant this 12-syllable mantra 4 times per breath. Om Muni Muni Ma Muni Yesawa, Om Muni Muni Ma Muni Yesawa, Om Muni Muni Ma Muni Yesawa, Om Muni Muni Ma Muni Yesawa. As Morticia Adams said to her husband Gomez, "Do not torture yourself. That is my job." Similarly, I would request of you to please give yourself permission to have a learning curve. Play with this mantra for 5 minutes every 12 hours or so, and within 1 or 2 weeks, you could become very comfortable with it. Om Muni Muni Ma Muni Yesawa, Om Muni Muni Ma Muni Yesawa, Om Muni Muni Ma Muni Yesawa, Om Muni Muni Ma Muni Yesawa. Once you have grown comfortable with it, during the recitation of the mantra, rather than concentrate, you can just simply gently rest your gaze on the one italicized word that is comprised entirely of capital letters. Doing so will increase the transformative potentiality of the exercise. Om Muni Muni Ma Muni Yesawa, Om Muni Muni Ma Muni Yesawa, Om Muni Muni Ma Muni Yesawa, Om Muni Muni Ma Muni Yesawa. Om Muni Muni Ma Muni Yesawa, Om Muni Muni Ma Muni Yesawa, Om Muni Muni Ma Muni Yesawa, Om Muni Muni Ma Muni Yesawa. Having chanted the mantra 16 times, let us rest in awareness and letting go. This is going to be the first of 4 steps to the mastery of mindfulness and meditation. When we notice our body inhaling, let us silently and mentally recite these 12 syllables, perceiving this very turbulent play of mind. You will notice that this is not an affirmation, which is wishful thinking. This is just a description of what's already going on thanks to our autonomic nervous system. As we notice our body exhaling, we could silently and mentally recite, relaxing into mind's non-graspable nature. Now, I would very much like to do this for 16 rounds. But I have been talking and jabbering and breathing much faster than you. So in the time it takes me to do 16 rounds, you might only have time to do 8 or 12 rounds. But this infers a question. How on earth can I count 16 rounds on just 4 fingers and 1 thumb? Assuming a round is 1 inhalation followed by 1 exhalation. During each inhalation, I will advance the tip of my left thumb, counting upon each finger's set of creases and their tip. You don't have to, but you're welcome to follow along with me. Let's meditate. I like to call this Bengali crease counting because the first person who demonstrated to me was Bengali. This can feel really weird the first time you do it. Practice it 5 minutes or for about 5 minutes every 12 hours or so, and within a fortnight, it can become very easy. We turn our attention now to the outer set of preliminary practices. Instead of viewing this through the lens of being rigid and fearful and controlling, let us view it through a different lens, one of being flexible and loving and laid back. You won't have to work very hard to find teachers who will tell you that life is suffering and nothing else. You and I know that that's a figure of speech. That's a metaphor. But there is a lot of suffering, and if we exercise the courage to notice other people's sufferings, it will feed our own empathy. If you've just tuned in during the inhalation, we silently and mentally recite this italicized bit, whose explanation I just gave. During our exhalation, we physically relax as best we can while striving to chant these 12 syllables 4 times per breath. Now, if this is your first time, please give yourself permission to have a learning curve. Om Muni Muni Ma Muni Esawa Om Muni Muni Ma Muni Esawa Om Muni Muni Ma Muni Esawa Om Muni Muni Ma Muni Esawa. There are people who would say that karma's going to get you if you don't watch out. But fear's no fun. It breeds selfishness, doesn't it? More empowering it is to look at interdependence as that which allows our love to lighten other people's load. Om Muni Muni Ma Muni Esawa Om Muni Muni Ma Muni Esawa Om Muni Muni Ma Muni Esawa Om Muni Muni Ma Muni Esawa. The part of our brain that helps us avoid our own suffering is completely different from the part of the brain that is empathetic. Live from empathy, and you will be much happier. You won't have to look very hard to find people who try to scare you with death. You gonna die, and then you're gonna be judged, and then you're gonna burn yourself in hell forever. Have a nice day. Gee, Johnny, thanks. With the changing of the seasons, we see the impermanence of a year. With the waxing and the waning of the moon, we see the impermanence of a month. With the rising and the setting of a sun, we see the impermanence of a day. And right now, with the swelling and the sinking of her chest, we feel the impermanence of a breath. Ever changing, one and all, there is nothing permanent to grasp. It is change that makes of grasping folly. Om Muni Muni Ma Muni Yesuwa Om Muni Muni Ma Muni Yesuwa Om Muni Muni Ma Muni Yesuwa Om Muni Muni Ma Muni Yesuwa. We won't have to look very far to find people who try to shove us into a neurotic obsession to make the most of every precious opportunity to meditate. Far better it is to follow the advice that we explored during the opening lesson and flow with the effortless effort of love's centered spontaneity, wherein we find ourselves doing the right thing. Om Muni Muni Ma Muni Yesuwa Om Muni Muni Ma Muni Yesuwa Om Muni Muni Ma Muni Yesuwa Om Muni Muni Ma Muni Yesuwa. Having chanted the mantra 16 times, again we rest in awareness and letting go, taking our second of 4 steps on the path of the mastery of awareness and letting go. During our inhalation, let us silently and mentally recite sitting tall to remind the tissues of our body to generate a vertical traction between our tush and our head. As we exhale, please silently and mentally recite the 3-syllable verb, relaxing. Doing so is not a contrivance, for we are already wired to effortlessly access our parasympathetic nervous system during each exhalation, which is already wired for both physical relaxation and mental release. And why are we playing with these words? So that our brain gets to cooperate with meditation as opposed to sabotage it. Kind of like holding the flashlight for Father. We turn now to the inner set of preliminary practices adapted from the final meditation manual of the late Tibetan yogi Dzogchen Rinpoche, a meditation manual which was lauded by the 14th Dalai Lama of Tibet, but which is pretty radical. Let us exercise the empathy, the compassion that longs to free all beings from the toxic tyranny of forever hating and craving and clinging that is known metaphorically as the three mental poisons. Om Muni Muni Ma Muni Esawa Om Muni Muni Ma Muni Esawa Om Muni Muni Ma Muni Esawa Om Muni Muni Ma Muni Esawa. It is lovely that we want to help others with the Buddha's teachings. But just as one would not practice brain surgery without being thoroughly trained first, similarly, if we want to help people with the Buddha's teachings, it's probably a very good idea to rely upon the Buddha's example, the Buddha's instructions, and the Buddha's students, which are known metaphorically as the three wish-fulfilling jewels. Om Muni Muni Ma Muni Esawa Om Muni Muni Ma Muni Esawa Om Muni Muni Ma Muni Esawa Om Muni Muni Ma Muni Esawa. If you really want to burn through your time, energy, and relationships, then few things are as efficient as defensiveness. Perhaps it could be wiser to apply that same enthusiasm to learning from our numerous mistakes. Om Muni Muni Ma Muni Esawa Om Muni Muni Ma Muni Esawa Om Muni Muni Ma Muni Esawa Om Muni Muni Ma Muni Esawa. Death is an inevitability. And evolution is assured that we would each fear death. You know, that we might live longer to spread our genetic material because that's how evolution works. NASA has taught us that anything that we become acquainted with frightens us less. It should therefore come as a little surprise that the Mahasiddhas of India and Tibet would often turn their mind towards their inevitable death and say, you know, when that time comes, it would be great if I had both the circumstances and the conditioning to coalesce my real or imagined energy into the subtle mind in my heart, that it might shoot like an arrow up my central channel, out my crown, and into the heart of teacher overhead, who is just simply a metaphor for the mastery of mindfulness and meditation. And that from this mindfulness to gaze down upon one's abandoned body and possessions, and as a final act of love, wish that others benefit from that stuff. Om Muni Muni Ma Muni Esawa Om Muni Muni Ma Muni Esawa Om Muni Muni Ma Muni Esawa Om Muni Muni Ma Muni Esawa. Having chanted the mantra 16 times, we come to our third step on the path of mastering awareness and letting go. During our inhalation, we could silently and mentally recite, "Notice this." Remembering this is not a contrivance, we are already wired to notice what's going on, vulnerably, passively, viscerally, and randomly, during each inhalation. And of course, during our exhalation, we continue to silently and mentally recite the 3-syllable verb relaxing. We come now to our third exercise of bliss and letting go, which is described in Sanskrit as Guru Yoga and in Tibetan as Lama Najor, and in English as union with the teacher. Turning our mind to this image, this figure of a body transformed into rainbow light reminds us of our own enlightened potential. The image of the copulating couple at his heart literally reminds us of pleasurable sensations and metaphorically reminds us of the teacher and the teachings. Om Muni Muni Ma Muni Yesawa 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 Om Muni Muni Ma Muni Yesawa. At last we come to the fourth stepping stone on the path of awareness and letting go. Having trained in bliss and letting go, during our inhalation, let's kick back and watch the antics of mind as silently and mentally we recite the demonstrative pronoun this. And during our exhalation, let us relax into mind's non-graspable nature, as silently and mentally we recite the one-syllable verb ease. Having climbed to the contemplative cruising altitude together as a team, let us meditate as transformatively as General Leia Organa upon Arjon Kloss under the guidance of Luke Skywalker. Having completed this morning's training and the tantric preliminaries, let us enter through the gateway of Tantra and now bring the experience of the 4 bases of mindfulness into the conventional path of love and letting go, where it is love that is emphasized and it is jealousy that is left over. If you've just joined us, welcome aboard. What is the philosopher's stone that transforms the lead of mindless mantra recitation into the gold of mantra meditation? It is twofold. During our inhalation, we could silently, mentally, and passively recite this italicized bit. During our exhalation, we can physically relax as best we can while striving to chant these 12 syllables 4 times per breath. If this is your first time joining me, please give yourself permission to have a learning curve. There is no need to torture yourself. Or in the words of Morticia Adams, Gomez, do not torture yourself. That's my job. Now, our job right now during these next 4 exercises is not to actively visualize or believe or emote or try to work magic like Gandalf the Grey or some great Sith Lord and their alchemy, which always comes at a terrible price. Instead, we're just going to play with words in harmony with our breathing, and that in and of itself is enough to exercise the neural pathways responsible for love. Let us lovingly wish, and by the way, the second fold of the Buddha's eightfold path is wishing love. They're a bunch of poop heads who stomp and snort and insist that love is attachment, and it should be, it is verboten. That's not what the Buddha thought, but maybe you know better. So, anywho, let us lovingly wish that each mind of each being now mastered the enlightened wisdom of a real or imagined Buddha, symbolized by a 1-syllable or seed mantra such as Hung. Om Muni Muni Ma Muni Esawa, Om Muni Muni Ma Muni Esawa, Om Muni Muni Ma Muni Esawa, Om Muni Muni Ma Muni Esawa. Never fear. You play with this exercise, with this mantra 5 minutes or so every 12 hours. And then within a week or two, this mantra could feel very comfortable to you. Let us explore the irony that right now we are using our speech to play with mantra. Meanwhile, let us lovingly wish that all beings everywhere use their speech in the most loving way, symbolized by mantra. Om Muni Muni Ma Muni Yesawa, Om Muni Muni Ma Muni Yesawa, Om Muni Muni Ma Muni Yesawa, Om Muni Muni Ma Muni Yesawa. As we use our body right now to sit and meditate and chant, let us lovingly wish that all beings' experience of their bodies was now as healthy. Would now enjoy the health that we see in Buddhist statuary depicting a Buddhist archetype of enlightenment or yidam. Om Muni Muni Ma Muni Yesawa, Om Muni Muni Ma Muni Yesawa, Om Muni Muni Ma Muni Yesawa, Om Muni Muni Ma Muni Yesawa. Let us wish health and safety and nourishment for all beings everywhere, especially those enduring the genocides in Palestine and Jordan and the Congo. Let us lovingly wish that each circumstance of each being was now as safe and as fortunate as the circumstances depicted in the paradise or pure land or vati of Buddhist art. Om Muni Muni Maha Muni Yesawa, Om Muni Muni Maha Muni Yesawa, Om Muni Muni Maha Muni Yesawa, Om Muni Muni Maha Muni Yesawa. Having trained in love and letting go, let us now rest in awareness and letting go. Let us view letting go through a physiological lens as we bring the experience of the four bases of mindfulness into the ultimate path of love and letting go, where it is letting go that is emphasized and where it is pride that is leapt over. As we breathe in, our circumstances can appear to us quite plainly. Yet, as we physically relax into the verbal recitation of this 12-syllable mantra, these exact same circumstances could begin to feel as if they were as non-graspable as a real or imagined paradise or vati, comprised only of light. Om Muni Muni Ma Muni Esawa, Om Muni Muni Ma Muni Esawa, Om Muni Muni Ma Muni Esawa, Om Muni Muni Ma Muni Esawa. As we breathe in, our bodies or forms could feel rather sensual, and yet, as we physically relax into the verbal recitation of this 12-syllable mantra, all forms of all beings can begin to feel as if they were as non-graspable as a Buddha's archetype or yadam comprised only of light. Om Muni Muni Ma Muni Esawa, Om Muni Muni Ma Muni Esawa, Om Muni Muni Ma Muni Esawa, Om Muni Muni Ma Muni Esawa. As we breathe in, our speech, our communication, and the communication that we perceive could seem rather resounding, and yet, as we physically relax into the verbal recitation of this 12-syllable mantra, all communication of all beings could begin to feel as if it was as non-graspable as a real or imagined mantra, comprised only of light. Om Muni Muni Ma Muni Esawa, Om Muni Muni Ma Muni Esawa, Om Muni Muni Ma Muni Esawa, Om Muni Muni Ma Muni Esawa. Arg, welcome aboard, mateys. The moment you have a specific question about Buddhist chanting, Buddhist meditation, Buddhist philosophy, or their application, please type your question in great detail in the chat window. As we breathe in, our mind, we could clearly experience our mind's sights, sound, seeing. Let's try this again. We can clearly experience our mind's perceptions, emotions, intentions, thoughts, memories, and imaginings. And yet, as we physically relax into the verbal recitation of this 12-syllable mantra, each mind of each being could begin to feel as if it was as non-graspable as a real or imagined one-syllable seed mantra, comprised only of light. Om Muni Muni Ma Muni Esawa, Om Muni Muni Ma Muni Esawa, Om Muni Muni Ma Muni Esawa, Om Muni Muni Ma Muni Esawa. Having chanted the mantra 16 times, let us rest in awareness and letting go. Or if you've just tuned in, think of it this way. As we inhale, let's kick back and watch the antics of mind. We can watch mind perceive, emote, intend, reason, recall, and imagine. As we exhale, we could relax into mind's non-graspable nature as silently and mentally we recite the one-syllable verb ease. Did I mention to silently and mentally recite the demonstrative pronoun this during the inhalation? I sure hope I did. Let us bring the five body regions into the path of bliss and letting go. As we physically relax into the verbal recitation of this 12-syllable mantra, whatever lower abdomen we might have noticed during our in-breath could begin to feel as if it was as non-graspable, as real or imagined Amo-Ga Siddhi comprised only of light. Om Muni Muni Ma Muni Yesuwa, Om Muni Muni Ma Muni Yesuwa, Om Muni Muni Ma Muni Yesuwa, Om Muni Muni Ma Muni Yesuwa. As we physically relax into the verbal recitation of our 12-syllable mantra, whatever navel we might have noticed during our previous inhalation can now begin to feel as if it was as non-graspable as real or imagined Ratna Sambhava comprised only of light. Om Muni Muni Ma Muni Yesuwa, Om Muni Muni Ma Muni Yesuwa, Om Muni Muni Ma Muni Yesuwa, Om Muni Muni Ma Muni Yesuwa. As we physically relax into the verbal recitation of this 12-syllable mantra, whatever chest we might have noticed during our previous inhalation can now begin to feel as if it was as non-graspable as real or imagined Akshobhya comprised only of light. Om Muni Muni Ma Muni Yesuwa, Om Muni Muni Ma Muni Yesuwa, Om Muni Muni Ma Muni Yesuwa, Om Muni Muni Ma Muni Yesuwa. As we physically relax into the verbal recitation of the mantra, whatever throat we might have noticed during our previous inhalation can now begin to feel as if it was as non-graspable as real or imagined Amitabha, comprised only of light. Om Muni Muni Ma Muni Yesuwa, Om Muni Muni Ma Muni Yesuwa, Om Muni Muni Ma Muni Yesuwa, Om Muni Muni Ma Muni Yesuwa. Welcome to this morning's live stream. The moment you have a specific question about Buddhist chanting, Buddhist meditation, Buddhist philosophy, or their application, please type your question in great detail in the chat window. As we physically relax into the verbal recitation of this 12-syllable mantra, whatever crown or scalp or top of our head we might have experienced during our previous inhalation can now begin to feel as if it was as non-graspable as real or imagined Vairochana comprised only of light. Om Muni Muni Ma Muni Yesuwa, Om Muni Muni Ma Muni Yesuwa, Om Muni Muni Ma Muni Yesuwa, Om Muni Muni Ma Muni Yesuwa. Having trained in bliss and letting go, let us kick back during our inhalation and watch the antics of mind as silently and mentally we recite the demonstrative pronoun this. During our exhalation, let us relax into mind's non-graspable nature as silently and mentally we recite the one-syllable verb is. Let us bring the 5 perceptions into the path of awareness and letting go. As we relax into the recitation of the mantra, whatever sights we might have noticed during our previous inhalation could begin to feel as if they were as non-graspable as the illusion of the infinite azure sky, bright and beautiful cloudless morn, which, although is tantalizing to the eye, is quite intangible to the hand. Om Muni Muni Ma Muni Esawa, Om Muni Muni Ma Muni Esawa, Om Muni Muni Ma Muni Esawa, Om Muni Muni Ma Muni Esawa. As we physically relax into the verbal recitation of the mantra, whatever sound we might have perceived during our previous inhalation can now begin to feel as if it was as non-graspable as vast open space. Om Muni Muni Ma Muni Esawa, Om Muni Muni Ma Muni Esawa, Om Muni Muni Ma Muni Esawa, Om Muni Muni Ma Muni Esawa. As we physically relax into the verbal recitation of this 12-syllable mantra, whatever scent we might have perceived during our previous inhalation can now begin to feel as if it was as non-graspable as a vast, empty void. Om Muni Muni Ma Muni Esawa, Om Muni Muni Ma Muni Esawa, Om Muni Muni Ma Muni Esawa, Om Muni Muni Ma Muni Esawa. I shit you not. In the enthusiasm and ignorance of my youth, I used to stand near stinking dumpsters and practice this exercise. So I'd be keenly motivated to let go of scent. As we physically relax into the verbal recitation of this mantra, whatever flavors we might have noticed during our previous inhalation can now begin to feel less graspable. Om Muni Muni Ma Muni Esawa, Om Muni Muni Ma Muni Esawa, Om Muni Muni Ma Muni Esawa, Om Muni Muni Ma Muni Esawa. As we physically relax into the verbal recitation of this 12-syllable mantra, whatever sensations we might have noticed during our previous inhalation can now begin to feel as if they were can now begin to feel less graspable. Om Muni Muni Ma Muni Esawa, Om Muni Muni Ma Muni Esawa, Om Muni Muni Ma Muni Esawa, Om Muni Muni Ma Muni Esawa. Having chanted the mantra 16 times, let us now rest in awareness and letting go. One moment. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. One, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. Let us bring the 5 mental poisons into the path of awareness and letting go. As we physically relax into the verbal recitation of this 12-syllable mantra, whatever hate we might have felt during our previous inhalation could feel less graspable. Oops, let's try this again. It could feel as non-graspable as mirror-like wisdom. Om Muni Muni Mahamuni Yesawa, Om Muni Muni Mahamuni Yesawa, Om Muni Muni Mahamuni Yesawa, Om Muni Muni Mahamuni Yesawa. As we physically relax into the verbal recitation of this 12-syllable mantra, whatever pride we might have felt during our previous inhalation begin to feel as if it was as non-graspable as Ratnasambhava's equalizing wisdom. Om Muni Muni Ma Muni Yesawa, Om Muni Muni Ma Muni Yesawa, Om Muni Muni Ma Muni Yesawa, Om Muni Muni Ma Muni Yesawa. As we physically relax into the verbal recitation of this 12-syllable mantra, whatever craving we might have noticed during our previous inhalation could begin to feel as if it was as non-graspable as Amitabha's discerning wisdom. Om Muni Muni Ma Muni Yesawa, Om Muni Muni Ma Muni Yesawa, Om Muni Muni Ma Muni Yesawa, Om Muni Muni Ma Muni Yesawa. As we physically relax into the verbal recitation of this 12-syllable mantra, whatever jealousy or competitiveness we might have noticed during our previous inhalation could begin to feel as if it was as non-graspable as Amoghasiddhi's all-accomplishing wisdom. Om Muni Muni Ma Muni Yesawa, Om Muni Muni Ma Muni Yesawa, Om Muni Muni Ma Muni Yesawa, Om Muni Muni Ma Muni Yesawa. As we physically relax into the verbal recitation of this 12-syllable mantra, whatever befuddlement or confusion we might have noticed during our previous inhalation, it could begin to feel as if it was as non-graspable as Vairochana's all-pervasive wisdom. Om Muni Muni Ma Muni Yesawa, Om Muni Muni Ma Muni Yesawa, Om Muni Muni Ma Muni Yesawa, Om Muni Muni Ma Muni Yesawa. Whatever filthy McNasty we might notice during our inhalation could feel far less graspable as we relax into our exhalation. Let us transcend the illusion of samsara and nirvana's vertical duality by metaphorically inviting all the real or imagined Buddhas, their paradises, and their denizens to dwell in the 84,000 pores of our skin, thus practicing the body mandala of duality's awareness and non-duality's release. Om Muni Muni Ma Muni Esawa Om Muni Muni Ma Muni Esawa Om Muni Muni Ma Muni Esawa Om Muni Muni Ma Muni Esawa. By way of explanation, this figure in the center represents us, our own enlightened potential. And these numerous teeny tiny Buddhas all around us are us imagining Buddhas and Pure Land paradises and bodhisattvas melting into us like snow melting onto hot stone. Om Muni Muni Ma Muni Esawa 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 Om Muni Muni Ma Muni Esawa. Having just trained in bliss and letting go, we now perform the silent act practice of awareness and letting go. As during our inhalation, we silently and mentally recite the demonstrative pronoun this, and during our exhalation, we silently and mentally recite the one-syllable verb ease. Let us bring the spontaneous play of mind into the path of awareness and letting go. During our inhalation, please silently and mentally recite relaxing into this. I should say please recite it silently, mentally, and passively. Now back in, what was it, 1989, Faith No More released Epic, which posed the question, what is this? What is this? This is whatever we notice during each exhalation. This is whatever we notice vulnerably, passively, viscerally, and randomly. This is whatever we notice, be it perception, whether it is a sight, a sound, a sensation, a flavor, a scent, or the like, whether it is an emotion, an intention, a thought, a memory, or an imagining, whether that which we notice is external, internal, physical, mental, pleasurable, painful, interesting, boring, glorious, or grotesque. Om Muni Muni Ma Muni Esawa 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 Om Muni Muni Ma Muni Esawa. 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 Let us seal this morning's practice with a love that wishes for universal enlightenment and well-being. Please chant with me. May whole minds of all beings lucid yet void no be as wise as our Buddha's mind symbolized by a one syllable measure. May all speech of all beings resounding yet void no be as loving as our Buddha's speech symbolized by a multi-syllable mantra. May all forms of all beings sensual yet void no be as healthy as a yadam depicted in Buddha's statuary. May all lots of all beings appearing yet void no be as fortunate as a pure land of law depicted in Buddhist paintings. If you feel that I have earned it, you could give this live stream a thumbs up. You could even help support this channel. In approximately 10.5 hours, I would very much like to return to lead today's evening meditation class and group practice. And if you are as geeky, whoops, wrong button. I guess not. Well, that's just silly, isn't it? That's weird.